bad that Matt, and particularly JP, have left because when I was Speaker, I had 3 different chairmen of the party that I worked under, Governor Sununu and Jack Kimball and Wayne McDonald, and they all worked hard. It's a volunteer job. They did a great job. But none of them did the job that Jennifer Horn and J.P. Marcillo were doing. It would have been a pleasure for me as Speaker not to have been out there as the voice of the party, as I too often was, pushing the conservative message, and not entirely involved at all times or being thought of as being involved in my role as a Speaker, as head of the legislative body. There was a lot of pushback. It would have been great to have a Jennifer Horn who was out there articulating the Republican message, and we know she's effective because we find that the governor starts asking her. It's like a rule in politics. If you hold a high office, you never respond to a member of the leadership of the other team's party. So when you have Governor Hassan arguing in public with Jennifer Horn, you know Jennifer Horn's winning. So it's been a great transition, and I really appreciate what they're doing for us. Matt wants to talk about the budget. I want to talk about this budget because you know what? You know what this budget that we passed means to the people of New Hampshire? If we had just flatlined their budget, the last budget they had, one that was in effect 4 years ago, they put it in effect 4 years ago, it was an $11.5 billion budget. If we just said at that point, stop, we're not going to increase spending anymore, rather than do what we did in the budget that was passed under my speakership, the budget that the Republican Senate forced Governor Hassan and the Democrats in the House to pass, we would have spent $2 billion more. My budget brought that $11.5 billion down to $10.4 billion. We saved about $1.2 billion. This budget is $800 million less. And you know, as I've come and talked to you before, you hear these figures, trillions and billions around. Let's bring it down to what it means in New Hampshire. For a family of 4, that means as a result of 2 Republican budgets, they have $6,150, a little bit more than that, in tax savings. That's the amount of money more that we would have spent. Now, it is huge. It's a lot of money. You know, as I've told you before, you look at that kind of money and you talk about that's the money that we heat our houses in the winter. That's the type of money that we use to feed our families. It's significant, and despite all this rhetoric that, you know, I was with you as the rhetoric was being repeated in the newspaper that children, I remember hearing it, children are going to die. Well, you know, children didn't die. And as a matter of fact, our state is healthy now. We went, and I'll leave this one figure with you because I don't want this to be just a talk of all facts and figures, but we went, according to the Tax Foundation, from having the worst business taxes in the country, the highest business taxes in the country, according to the Tax Foundation, to they just came out with their overall rating of the states for their business tax climate. We're number 7, we're in the top 10. And it's a direct result of our controlling spending, our reducing taxes, in particular business taxes, regulatory changes that we've talked about over time, taking the Department of Labor and positioning them to be a partner with business and not an adversary for business, and it has made a difference. You know, I am running for Congress, and you know, I had a choice, and probably the most reasonable choice would have been for me just to step back and say, okay, I contributed what I was going to contribute. But I think we can take the approach that we took to Concord, I think we can take it to Washington. If you look at the structural deficit that we had when we sat down 2.5 years ago to put the budget in place, it was about a 17 or an 18% structural deficit. That means spending at the current rate was about 17 or 18% over revenues. As bad as it is on the federal level, it's only, and I say only, it's horrible when you think about it, but it's only 24%. We're taking in, we're spending rather 24% more money than we're taking in. We can solve this. We solved it in New Hampshire without destroying the state. We have a stronger economy now in New Hampshire. Our unemployment rate's gone down to 5.3%. Things are getting better here. despite the national malaise. We can do this at a federal level. As quickly? No, not as quickly. There's greater dependency that has been put into the economy over the last 50 to 75 years. But we can start a transition. If we just stop the spending increases for the next 4 or 5 years, revenues would catch up. Now, one of the things, somebody asks, how are we going to win? You know what we're going to win? We're not going to win by us being a lot of typical, what I call Northeastern politicians. You ever listen to somebody like a Bobby Jindal or a Hilly Barber or some of these Southern politicians as opposed to a Northern politician? I tend to be one of those. You get involved in facts and figures, and you become a policy wonk, and that's not going to move voters. Anyone who's given any thought about it is either with us when it comes to limited government and liberty and fiscal responsibility, they're not. What we've got to talk about is optimistically about the future. We've got to talk about why people in New Hampshire have to vote Republican. And we know why, if we think about it. We know it's because our children are going to have a life that is much more constrained than the opportunities we had unless we bring our government under control. We can see what it looks like to have a government out of control. We can see what it looks like in terms of having a $17 trillion government debt, 105% of our gross national product. What that's going to mean for our children and our grandchildren when they have to start paying off the debt. How immoral that is now. We can talk about it, we can lecture people, or we can tell them that now is the time for us to do what prior generations have always done. Make sure that the greatest generation isn't my father's generation, isn't this generation, it's always the next generation. We have to make sure that the next generation will be the greatest generation. We're not going to do that unless we bring our fiscal house under control now. We're not going to do it unless we bring the federal government under control now. There's a common theme that runs through all these scandals, and the common theme is a government out of control, a government that is too large that it becomes uncontrollable. Listen to what the Obama administration says every time a new scandal pops up. Benghazi, we didn't know what was going on there, we couldn't control it. Or the IRS, it's just too big to control. We didn't want that to happen, too big to control. Federal government's become too big. We have to talk to people about what is going to make that bright future for their kids and our kids. And that's how we win, by contrasting the vision that they are constantly giving us of a government that controls more and more of our lives and therefore is taking more and more of our fortunes, and ours, which is a bright future of individual liberty and individual freedom, and people who can make their own way and therefore have greater prosperity. I think we can draw together a message like that. That's why I'm running. I appreciate all of your help. I'm going to need as much help as possible, volunteers or anyone. If anyone can give a few hours a week, there's just a lot to do. So I'll circulate my card around if I might, and be glad to talk to you about it. And once again, I appreciate you listening to me. Any questions or anything? Thank you.
When does your campaign get into high gear? When does it start wrapping up?
Well, we have a committee that has been filed down in Washington. We'll be reporting fundraising numbers Monday for the committee. At this phase, we're talking to people, and a lot of it is just trying to get the finances together to run. Probably in terms of a formal announcement, unless there's a final decision not to run, that'll be in September, so probably near the end of this fiscal quarter. But at this point, we are certainly trying to put together an organization so that we can reach out to all parts of the 2nd Congressional District. 2nd Congressional District is almost I'm almost doing what Jim is doing. I'm almost running statewide. It's about, I don't know, geographically, Jim, it's about 2/3 of the state. Yeah, so it's everywhere from the Canadian border up in Pittsfield all the way down to Keene and over to Salem and Linda. So we're going to try to put together an organization that reaches out to all folks